My beloved child, stop scrolling for a moment. Do not move away from these words just yet, because something is about to be revealed to you that may change the way you understand the person who has been occupying such a quiet place inside your heart. What you are about to hear was meant to find you at a moment when you may be questioning love, timing, commitment, or even whether the person you feel connected to is truly capable of staying. Pause here. Take one slow breath, because there is a message waiting beneath the surface of your life, and it concerns someone who may not be saying everything they feel. Your soulmate wants to stay, not temporarily, not because they are lonely, not because they need someone to fill an empty space. They want to stay in a way that reaches beyond attraction, beyond chemistry, beyond the excitement of being wanted. They want permanence. But there is one condition, and before you become afraid of what that condition might be, listen carefully. It is not about money. It is not about appearance. It is not about you becoming someone different. It is not about proving that you are worthy of their love. The condition is something much deeper, something your soulmate has been struggling to understand within themselves. And if you hear this message all the way through, you may finally understand why their behavior has sometimes seemed confusing. Why they came close and then pulled away. Why they seemed certain one day and uncertain the next. Why their eyes could say what their mouth refused to admit. Why they may have acted as though they were ready to lose you, even when something inside them was desperately trying to hold on. There has been a battle happening inside this person, and you have only seen the outside of it. You saw the silence. You saw the distance. You saw the hesitation. You may have even seen moments that made you believe they did not care, but heaven saw what you could not see, the nights when they questioned themselves, the moments when they remembered you, the private conversations they had with their own heart. The fear they carried whenever they imagined a future without you. And there is something extraordinary about that fear. They are not only afraid of losing you, they are afraid of losing the version of themselves that exists when they are loved by you, because you reached somewhere inside them that very few people have ever reached. You made them feel seen. Not admired, not desired, seen. And being truly seen can be frightening when someone has spent years hiding behind strength, independence, pride, or emotional distance. Your soulmate may have learned to survive without depending on anyone. They may have convinced themselves that needing another person was weakness. They may have built walls so carefully that even they forgot what was behind them. Then you arrived, and somehow, without forcing your way through those walls, you made them want to open the door. That is why this connection has felt different, but there is a part of the story you may not understand. They did not pull away because the connection meant nothing. They pulled away because the connection demanded something they were not prepared to give. It demanded honesty. It demanded vulnerability. It demanded consistency. It demanded that they stop hiding, and perhaps more than anything else, it demanded that they choose, not just you, but the kind of person they would have to become if they wanted to keep you. That is the condition. They cannot stay forever while remaining the same person they were before. They cannot ask for your heart while continuing to protect their own with silence. They cannot promise permanence while secretly preparing an escape route. They cannot build a future with you while allowing fear to make every important decision. They must choose courage. And my beloved child, they are beginning to understand that something has shifted. You may not have seen it yet, you may not have received the proof you wanted, but somewhere in their inner world, a decision has been forming. They have begun to realize that loving you is not the difficult part, staying is the difficult part. Staying requires them to remain present when things become uncomfortable. Staying requires them to communicate instead of disappearing. Staying requires them to tell the truth even when the truth makes them vulnerable. Staying requires them to stop treating love like something they can enter and exit whenever fear becomes overwhelming, and this realization has frightened them. Because they know you are no longer willing to accept what you once accepted, you have changed. You may still love deeply, you may still care, you may still remember, but something inside you has become stronger. You have learned that love without peace becomes exhaustion. You have learned that chemistry without consistency becomes confusion. You have learned that promises without action become wounds, and your soulmate can sense this transformation. That is why they are watching you differently now. They are wondering whether there is still a place for them beside the person you are becoming. They remember who you were, but they are beginning to realize that they cannot simply return to that version of your story. If they come back, they must come back differently. And that truth has been sitting heavily on their heart. There is something they wish they could tell you. They wish they could explain why they were not ready before. They wish they could go back to certain conversations and answer differently. They wish they could erase the moments when you questioned your own worth because of their inconsistency. They wish they could tell you that their confusion was never proof that you were unlovable. It was proof that they were conflicted, but even that explanation cannot erase the pain. And they know it. That is why they are afraid. They know that if they return, you may ask questions, real questions, questions that cannot be answered with a simple "I missed you." You may ask, "What changed?" You may ask, "Why should I trust you?" You may ask, "How do I know you will stay this time?" And there is one question they fear more than all the others. Are you finally ready to choose me without hesitation? They have imagined answering that question, and every time they do, they understand that the answer cannot simply be words. They would have to demonstrate it. They would have to show you, day after day, not for a week, not until the excitement returns, not until the fear disappears, but long enough for your nervous heart to believe that the ground beneath you is stable. That is what staying means. And perhaps this is why heaven has allowed distance between you, not as punishment, not as cruelty, but as revelation. Because sometimes people do not understand what they have until they are forced to experience life without it. Your soulmate had to discover what your absence felt like, and they did. They discovered that distractions could occupy their time but could not replace emotional familiarity. They discovered that meeting new people did not erase old memories. They discovered that being surrounded by others did not necessarily mean feeling understood. They discovered that some connections leave fingerprints on the soul, and yours left one. There are moments when something reminds them of you unexpectedly. A song, a place, a phrase, a familiar scent, a particular time of day. Something ordinary becomes extraordinary because it carries a memory, and for a brief moment, they are transported back. They remember your face, your voice, the way you reacted to something. the little things you probably never realized they noticed, and then comes the ache, because memory has a strange power. It can make someone realize that what they once treated as ordinary was actually precious. Your soulmate has been experiencing that realization repeatedly, and eventually, those memories became impossible to ignore. They started asking themselves a question: what if I was wrong? Not wrong about loving you, wrong about believing they could live peacefully without facing what they felt. That question has been growing, and it is leading them toward a decision. But my beloved child, do not misunderstand this. You are not being told to wait. You are not being asked to chase them. You are not being asked to send a message first. You are not being asked to sacrifice your dignity for the possibility of reunion. Heaven does not need you to beg for what is meant to meet you freely. If this person wants to stay, they must learn how to walk toward you without being dragged. That is part of the condition. They must choose you voluntarily. They must choose truth voluntarily. They must choose emotional maturity voluntarily. Because love that has to be forced is not the love you are being prepared for. And this is where your own transformation becomes important. You have spent enough time wondering whether someone else will choose you. Now you must choose yourself. That does not mean closing your heart. It means opening it without abandoning your wisdom. It means allowing love to exist without allowing fear to control you. It means saying, I can love you, but I cannot lose myself trying to keep you. That sentence contains more power than you realize, because when you stop negotiating against your own worth, the entire dynamic changes. You no longer chase, you observe. You no longer beg for reassurance, you allow consistency to speak. You no longer believe every beautiful promise. You watch whether the promise becomes behavior, and your soulmate knows this. They know that the old version of you might have accepted a few emotional words and called it enough, but the person you are becoming will need something deeper. You will need peace. You will need honesty. You will need reliability. You will need to know that when life becomes difficult, they will not disappear, and perhaps this is exactly what they are preparing to offer, not perfection, but presence. There is a difference. They may still have fears, they may still make mistakes, they may still need time to learn, but something inside them is beginning to say, if I want this person in my life permanently, I have to stop running whenever love becomes real. That realization is powerful, because your soulmate has been running from more than you. They have been running from themselves, from old wounds, from fears of abandonment, from fears of rejection, from the belief that vulnerability leads to pain, from the idea that independence is safer than intimacy. And now they are beginning to see that safety and isolation are not the same thing. They can protect themselves from heartbreak by never fully opening, but they will also protect themselves from the deepest forms of love. And they are tired of pretending they do not care, tired of acting unaffected, tired of convincing themselves that another person could simply replace what they felt with you, tired of living with an unfinished sentence inside their heart. There is something they want to finish saying, but before they can say it, they must cross the distance created by their own fear, and that distance is shrinking. You may notice subtle signs. You may suddenly feel more peaceful about the connection. You may think of them without the same desperation. You may find yourself remembering the good without needing to relive the pain. That is not necessarily a signal that you must return. It may be a signal that you are healing. And healing changes everything. Because when you heal, you stop asking, "How do I make them love me?" You start asking, "Does the love they offer honor who I have become?" That is the question heaven wants you to ask, not whether they want you, whether they can cherish you, not whether they miss you, whether they can remain, not whether they feel strongly, whether they can love responsibly. And that distinction is about to become very important, because your soulmate is reaching a point where feelings alone are no longer enough for them either. They want more. They want the ordinary moments, the quiet mornings, the conversations after difficult days, the laughter that comes without planning, the comfort of knowing someone is there, the ability to build something instead of constantly wondering whether it will disappear. They are beginning to imagine a life where you are not merely a chapter, but part of the home, and that thought has affected them more deeply than they expected. They imagine waking up and knowing they do not have to wonder where you stand. They imagine sharing small victories with you. They imagine being present for the things they once missed. They imagine growing older beside someone who knows their history and still chooses them. And then fear interrupts the dream. What if they no longer want that with me? That is the question that keeps them awake, because they know they may have waited too long. They know they may have caused wounds that cannot be erased simply by returning. They know forgiveness is not automatic, and they know trust must be rebuilt. But something inside them has finally become stronger than the fear of rejection. The desire for truth is becoming stronger than the desire for comfort. That is a turning point, and there is another reason this moment is different. You are no longer energetically standing in the same place. You have released something. Maybe you released the need to know exactly when they would return. Maybe you released the fantasy of how everything had to happen. Maybe you finally accepted that if they came back, they would have to meet you where you are. That surrender created space. And sometimes the moment you stop gripping an outcome is the moment life becomes capable of surprising you. Your soulmate feels that change. They may not understand why. They may simply feel that something is different. The emotional cord between you no longer feels like desperate longing. It feels quieter, stronger, less demanding, and that quietness is drawing them closer, because when love stops screaming for attention, sometimes its truth becomes easier to hear. My beloved child, there is something I need you to remember when this person eventually approaches you. Do not let the intensity of the moment make the decision for you. A reunion can feel powerful. A familiar voice can awaken 1,000 memories. A single look can make years of distance disappear for a few seconds. But you must look beyond the moment. Look at the pattern. Ask yourself whether their presence brings peace or confusion, whether their actions match their words, whether they can communicate when emotions become difficult, whether they can respect your boundaries, whether they can remain consistent after the excitement fades, because the condition is not simply that they love you, the condition is that they learn how to stay. And staying is a spiritual discipline. It means choosing the relationship again and again. It means showing up when there is nothing dramatic happening. It means caring during ordinary days. It means repairing after conflict. It means apologizing without being forced. It means listening without preparing a defense. It means making room for another person's heart without losing your own. Your soulmate is beginning to understand this, but there is still one final battle inside them. They are afraid of what they will have to admit, because before they can ask you to trust them, they must admit that they were the one who broke the trust. Before they can ask you to open your heart, they must admit that they were the one who taught you to protect it. Before they can ask you to stay, they must face the possibility that you learned how to leave. That is the truth they are approaching. And something happened recently that brought this truth directly to the surface. They encountered a situation that made them imagine you permanently absent from their future. For the first time, the thought did not feel temporary, it felt real. They imagined a future where you were happy without them. A future where someone else knew your daily routines, someone else heard your stories, someone else received your affection, someone else stood beside you during moments they once dreamed of sharing, and suddenly, they felt something they had been avoiding, not jealousy, loss, real loss, the realization that life does not promise endless chances, that some doors close, that some people eventually stop waiting, that sometimes the person you assumed would always be there quietly chooses peace and walks forward. That realization shook them, and in that moment, they made a private promise: if they ever get another chance with you, they will not waste it. But promises made in private are easy. The real test is what happens when the opportunity arrives, and that opportunity may be closer than you think. There is a conversation forming, a moment that has not happened yet but is already being approached by both sides in ways you cannot see. They are preparing words. You are preparing emotionally. Circumstances are shifting, and when the moment comes, you may not recognize its importance immediately. It may begin simply, almost casually, a message, a question, a familiar name appearing unexpectedly, something that seems small, but beneath that small beginning will be years of emotion, years of silence, years of unanswered questions, and one decision: will the two of you repeat the old pattern? Or will you finally create something new? That is why the condition matters. Your soulmate wants to stay forever. But forever cannot be built on the foundation of fear. They must choose courage, and you must choose self-respect. They must choose honesty, and you must choose discernment. They must stop running, and you must stop chasing. They must come toward you, and you must allow them to prove that they know how to remain. That is the balance. That is the doorway, but there is something they have not told you yet, something they have been carrying quietly, a truth about why they became so afraid of permanence in the first place. It has nothing to do with your worth. It goes deeper. There is an old wound they have never fully healed, a wound that taught them, long before you arrived, that people eventually leave. And because they secretly believed everyone leaves, they learned to leave first. They thought they were protecting themselves, but now they are beginning to understand that the strategy that protected them from pain also kept them from receiving the love they wanted most, and you triggered that realization. not because you were meant to save them, but because your presence exposed the wound. Now they must heal it themselves, and that is the final condition. They cannot ask you to become their healer.